We're on page 3. This is where we left off last time. We're dealing with Ebla, Tel Mardik. When you talk about Ebla, please identify its modern site name, Tel Mardik. The ancient name is Ebla. Please also identify it as a site that includes over 22,000 tablets. They're written in cuneiform script in the Eblaite language. And they are very significant because they date back as far as the 24th, or the 3rd century, the 3rd century, 2400 BC, at the what is considered to be a certain early date. Some go back further than that, saying that the tablets can be dated all the way back to 2600 BC. But you're right there in the mid part of the 3rd millennium BC. So this is even before the time of Abraham that these date to. And they come all the way down to around 1600 BC, which is prior to the time of Moses. So this is a set of documents here, a body of material that is parallel to the patriarchal period. And therefore it has great significance, especially for studies of the book of Job, studies of the book of Genesis are very significant. One of the most significant finds could perhaps be with regard to Genesis chapter 14. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So as we're looking at this on where is Ebla, remember we talked about this at the conclusion of our previous session, that it was finally located in the 1970s, and that at that site, one of the things uncovered were these offering tables. Now take a good close look at these tables. Notice that they have a indentation on the surface there. They're concave. And that's to allow the blood to run from the various corners and the edges more toward the middle. And then notice there is a drain that is found on one side where you can place a bucket, either hang it from it or place it underneath it, and the blood will drain from this spout into a receptacle. So you can have a means of collecting the blood. There is a separate area here at the front part of the altar where they believe that's where the priests would lay their tools, their knives. Because once they had the animal slaughtered and laid up on the table, then they cut away all the parts that were to be burned or offered separately. And once they had it up there, they would skin it, take away the hooves, whatever they needed to do. So this is like a butcher's table, but it is in a temple area, and it's preparing the meat for the altar. It's not the altar, it's the sacrificial table.
What would be the approximate size?
That's a good question. I assume that the stick down here in the foreground is at least a 2-meter stick, if not 3 meters. So I would guess, just looking at that, that they are about a meter deep and a little over a meter wide. That's a guesstimation. I'd have to look it up in the documentation to find out for certain. But be large enough to put a sheep on and do all the butchering, or a goat and a calf and perhaps a larger animal, although it'd be difficult to lift them up there. So they may quarter the larger animal before they lay it up there and finish the rest of the process. The interesting thing about this is that the same exact kind of tables are described in Ezekiel's visions in the last part of Ezekiel as being part of the millennial temple. You have the tables there as well, and the arrangements made, and they're almost identical to what you see here. And it shows there's a great deal of thought has gone into this and making the arrangement to where everything can be done efficiently and well. Scott?
Just looking at the picture, it doesn't look like it would be easy to walk up to the table and put something on it. I mean, what part are we not seeing of the excavation, or how far did it go? In other words, it looks like they'd almost have to be on their knees or something.
No, this is just where they're exposed. And so we're not seeing the foot of it. We're not seeing where the base would be. It's not all excavated around it. In other words, this is not like a Japanese tea table, right? Right. So it'd be set up high. It'd be more like waist height, probably. Yes. But as you're seeing it here, it's in situ, the way they discovered them. All right? Now, the map on the right just shows you the influence of Ebla. It's centrally located along the main caravan route from Mesopotamia down to Egypt. And as well, everything that comes out of the Hittite kingdom in Turkey and coming down through that region is there as well. Notice that Ugarit is almost directly to the west there on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. So the Ugaritic kingdom is close by. It's a significant area, significant location with a great historical impact. You can see Karshemish up there on the Euphrates, where one of the central battles took place. And you see all the way down through Palestine. Now, this is a artist's conception of what the city may have looked like at its height, with the city wall around it as you approach it, and with the citadel at the top. And the tablets that were found, this photographed in situ, the way they fell. I mentioned this to you last time, that the librarians are ecstatic about this, because as they pick up these tablets, they are in the order that they were arranged in on the shelves themselves. So it gives them an idea of exactly what type of library system they were using. The first discovery of tablets was about 11,000 tablets. Of multiple tablets. There were previous discoveries of a few dozen at a time here and there. But the main archive, the first uncovering of the main archive was 11,000, and now there's over 22,000 that have been recovered from the site as a whole. When you're looking at a tablet from Ebla, you see that it's written with the cuneiform script. Your first question is, how do you read such a tablet? It looks like you've got boxes there. Do you read it left to right, right to left, bottom to top, top to bottom? Well, what you do is you begin at the upper left-hand corner, and you read down the tablet. When you get to the bottom of that, you turn it. You turn the bottom toward you, to where, as you turn it over then, the top is become the bottom and the bottom has become the top. You rotate it. You pull the top toward you. It'd be like if I have this, I read down from the top down, and then I turn it this way and continue reading. This is where I ended. I continue reading at the top on the other side, read the first column there, rotate it again, and begin the second column. Okay? So it's a rotating writing as you go through, as you read it, until you've gotten all the way through all the columns to the right-hand side. Don't you wish all your textbooks were that way? No, we don't. Yes, Andy.
How would they get that impression on it on both sides without mucking the...
That's a good question. Skill. Skill. I don't know if maybe at times they would have extra areas on the left and the right that they would cut away before they would fire it. But yes, you marvel at this. I mean, there are things they do with these tablets that you sit there and say, how in the world did they manage that? But in going through, in trial and error, in checking over and over again, and then double checking, that's the way they read. Yes, Adrian.
How large are these tablets?
This one is about 4 inches high and about 4 inches wide. So it would be small. It would be small. Yes, like a handheld. It's a BlackBerry. A BlackBerry from the 2600s BC. All right? The iPod, right. And you can see here an example of how an individual would make a clay tablet, and with a seal impression across. This is the type of thing that was done in Babylonia and Assyria. Yes, Aaron?
How much information could they get on there? Like what?
Quite a bit of information, because each of the symbols can be used sometimes as what we call logograms, where each symbol can be a word. And at other times they are phonograms, where they are either a syllable or a letter that you have several in a row. But on these, a lot of them are logograms. So that means every one of those little squares is a word. So that means in each column here you had, what, 11 words? 12 words, 12, 13 words. One of them has 14. And so you have 9 times, let's say 12 is 108 times 2, because you have the other side, is 216 words. So somewhere over 200 words, so it'd be the equivalent of you're doing a typed double-spaced single page. About 250 words is a single page of typed script you do in a paper, double-spaced. So it'd be that, about that much material. Yes, Whitney.
Cuneiform a language or a script?
Cuneiform is the script. Then you have the languages written in cuneiform. You have Sumerian is written in a cuneiform script. You have Akkadian written in a cuneiform script, which has various styles. You have the Babylonian, you have the Assyrian, Akkadians. And then you have eblaite, as you have here. And we also have a style of cuneiform used for Ugaritic, which is very, very different. We'll be talking about it here in a little bit. So cuneiform means a wedge form of script. And that is formed by using the stylus that you see here. You have a wedge. It's almost like the mouth of the end of a screwdriver, a regular screwdriver, not a Phillips, but a regular screwdriver. At the end of it, a chisel face on it, and then a rounded top to it. And when the person is writing, he can switch that over and stab the top in to make a round thing that will be used for numbers and used for certain other symbols. And so the stylus is what produces this wedge writing, and that's what's called cuneiform. As you look once again at the Mesopotamian Valley, you can see here around Mosul, you have Nineveh right across the river from Mosul. Then south of there, as you go on down, there are a number of other regions. You have Nuzi, also known as Nuzi. We'll be talking about that location where a number of tablets have been found. In addition, you have Babylon further to the south. And on further, you have Ur in the far south. And then you can see Basra down there. Basra is now a seaport and is not considered a seaport in ancient times. It seems the Persian Gulf has expanded and the water level has raised in the meantime. It's, the earlier documents seem to show Basra a bit of a distance away from the Persian Gulf. And Nineveh up there near Mosul. Okay. Yes, question, Bobby?
I heard or Ur, as you just told us how to pronounce. It was located, or there's at least a debate about where it was located.
Okay, the debate about Ur? Yes, there is a debate. Some locate Ur near Haran, up in the north. Haran is up here near Karshemish. And some think that Ur should be in that area because they believe that when Abraham left Ur of the Chaldees, that was when he left his father Terah at Haran. Others think he left Ur of the Chaldees to go to the old family home at Haran. And the preponderance of evidence is for the southern Ur at this point in time. It's like the north and south Galatian theory in the New Testament. You have a north and south Ur theory in the Old Testament. And then also here I've marked Mari. Mari is another site where there have been a number of tablets that have been located and a number of factors within those tablets that seem to tie together with patriarchal and Mosaic times. At Nuzi, modern Yorgun Tepe, we have clay tablets dated from 1600 to 1350 BC. It was an ancient trade center, and it was an Assyrian city. From these tablets, one of them which you see here in the illustration, there are property deeds among them, so it helps to understand the process of the owning of property, the filing of property deeds, who could inherit things, the wills that are involved there. If any of you had the privilege of going back and looking at the wills of your ancestors back 10 generations as I have, it's quite fascinating because it lists all the things they own and the value of them and who is to inherit them. And the same things happen at Nuzi. And there are marriage agreements, contracts that are into for people to become married to one another. So we have a good idea of the practices with regard to marriage in Assyria from that time, and also the adoptions that took place. And one of the descriptions of the adoptions seems to parallel the adoption that Abraham performed when he adopted Eliezer of Damascus to be his heir because he had no son yet. And it's the tablets at Nuzi that helped provide that. In Genesis 15, 2-3, we have that account of Abraham being given the covenant by God. And here we have at Nuzi a tablet of adoption belonging to Nashwi, the son of Arsheni. He adopted Wulu, the son of Puhisheni. As long as Nashwi is alive, Wulu shall provide food and clothing. When Nashwi dies, Wulu shall become the heir. If Nashwi has a son of his own, he shall divide the estate equally with Wulu, but the son of Nashwi shall take the gods of Nashwi. The idea here is that when a person has a son, the son inherits everything. If he does not have a son, then he can adopt someone. So here God is making promises to Abraham, and he's promising that his seed shall inherit all these things, but Abraham doesn't have a son yet. So why isn't Abraham terribly upset at this point? Because perhaps they're following the exact same practices. He came from the Mesopotamian region. He came from this area. Perhaps he's familiar with this practice. And so he was just thinking that, as he did say later, that he would take Eliezer and adopt him. And in Genesis 16:3, we have the account there of the maiden of Sarah being given to Abraham. And at Nuzi, if Kalim Ninu, the wife, will not bear, Kalim Ninu shall acquire a woman of the land of Lulu. It almost sounds like fiction, doesn't it? As wife for Shenima, the husband, and Kalim Ninu may not send the offspring away. But what did Sarah do? She sent them away. She sent Hagar away. That was not legitimate even in the secular world of the time. That highlights then the disobedience and the hard heart and the jealousy and perhaps the greed of Sarah at that point in her life. Then we go to Ugarit, which we saw there was to the west of Ebla, located near the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. And we have a group of tablets found there by a farmer who was plowing his field. He hit a rock. And he went back to get this rock and see if he could get it out of the ground. And the rock turned out to be a stone from a temple. And it was hollow underneath. And it turned into a huge discovery. And the excavations at Ras Shamra. Ras Shamra is the name of the location in the modern terminology. Ugarit is the ancient title. The tablet you see on the right in cuneiform, Ugaritic cuneiform, is a legend of an individual known as Akat, who is the son of, depends on whether you pronounce it Daniel or Danael. But it is the same name, the same name basically as Daniel the prophet. But it's from much earlier. This is from 1400 BC. In Palestine, several abecedaries have been found. And it's just like it sounds, A, B, C, D. Just add the area on the end and it's abecedary. It's an alphabet. And an alphabetic stone, an alphabetic inscription, and on it is the Ugaritic alphabet. And there are a few of the letters, like that one, looks like a sheen, doesn't it, with its 3 horns. And it is a sheen. It is a sheen. And over here we have the Aleph, and here we have the Daleth. You see there's not a whole lot of similar characteristics beyond the sheen, are there? There are 22 Hebrew letters in the Hebrew alphabet. In the alphabet of Ras Shamra, it varies between 23 and 26. Most think now 26 or 27 is about the right number of letters in the Ugaritic alphabet. It has 3 alephs and 3 ayins that are added in. And so there's a number of different issues that are involved in this, but it's very easy language to learn. If you know Hebrew, and if you can learn a little over 20 more symbols formed in cuneiform, you can read Ugaritic. Because Hebrew and Ugaritic are very closely related. The vocabularies are very close. Both are Northwest Semitic languages. They are sister languages. And so it would not take you long to read Ugaritic. I teach it in the doctoral program. In fact, right now, this coming fall, Dr. Grisanti is going to teach it to one of our doctoral students. And it only takes a semester to be able to pick up Ugaritic and be able to read a large amount of its literature. And it's very interesting literature, a lot of epic poetry, and some other documents besides that, and a lot of revelation concerning different words that help to understand Hebrew vocabulary. We have a lot of hapax legomena in Hebrew where it's difficult to understand the meaning. Even we're still guessing even by context. The Ugaritic has helped to us to find some of those hapax legomena's meanings by seeing the parallel examples used in different contexts in Ugaritic. Do you have a question, Matt?
Yes, sir. How big is the vocab? Larger than Hebrew?
The vocabulary, how big is the vocabulary of Ugaritic? It's less than Hebrew because you don't have as much literature in Ugaritic as we have in Hebrew. So you have 800 root words in Hebrew, and probably in Ugaritic somewhere around 400 to 500. And many of those are identical to what the Hebrew has. So it would not take long to learn it. And this letter that has the 6 pieces all piled on top of each other, that's the yod. So the littlest letter in Hebrew is not the littlest letter in Ugaritic. Paleo-Hebrew script. This is something that you need to learn for the final exam. On the final exam, there will be a sample with Paleo-Hebrew script that I will ask you to identify. I think it's 5 letters. That's all you have to identify is 5 letters off of the inscription. You circle them, draw an arrow out to the side, and write the Hebrew letter or write its name. So as you're looking at an inscription like this, the very first letter up at the upper right is an aleph. It looks like an A laid on its side. That's because this is a Phoenician script. Paleo-Hebrew is related to ancient Phoenician. Where do we derive the English alphabet? It's derived from the Phoenician via the Greek. And so if you take this aleph and you turn it, you rotate it 90 degrees to the right, it becomes a capital A, which is the same as the capital alpha. And a number of the letters are that way. For example, down here, you have a letter that is the daleth that looks exactly like the delta. Looks exactly like a delta. And there are a number of other letters to be involved here too, but let's take a look at them. The first letter is an aleph. The second letter is always easy to recognize. It's the only letter in the Hebrew alphabet that extends above the letters above the line. What letter is it? Lamed. Lamed is the one that has the big tail on it. And even in the square script, the Aramaic script, or the Jewish script that was adopted after the exile to Babylon, the Lamed still has a tail on the top that is recognizable. So there's an aleph and a Lamed. And then after you have a dot. That's a word divider, because the Paleo-Hebrew script, both in the inscriptions on tablets and on sherds of pottery where you have it inscribed in ink, as well as on the manuscripts that are found at Qumran of Paleo script, of all the books of the Pentateuch and the book of Job, 14 manuscripts in Paleo-Hebrew script, they use word dividers to divide it. Therefore, when you have a discussion about word division in ancient documents, that is not an issue in Paleo-Hebrew script. Paleo-Hebrew script characteristically puts in the word divider. That confusion can only occur after the exile in the copies, where the word dividers are no longer used with the Jewish script. So we have an aleph and a lamed. What do you think that would mean? And I suppose you probably have it right there in front of you, don't you? Do you have all the answers there already? Don't you wish you could take your quiz and final exam that way? With the answers in front of you? Okay, so aleph lamed means what? El means what? God, or preposition el means unto. Unto or to. How do you begin a letter? Do you begin it with God or you begin it with to? You begin it with to. All right? We have the same 2 letters following, aleph lamed, and then we have a yod. And as you look at that yod, there, the sheen and the baith, this is Eliashib. Eliashib. To Eliashib. To Eliashib. And it goes on from there The next letter after that is a wow. And. Notice the word wrap. It wraps the word to the beginning of the next line. You just keep writing. You've reached the end of the line. You have no more space to write there. You continue your word on the very next line. And that's a lot of the inscriptions in Paleo-Hebrew are done that way, as well as in Moabite, Ammonite, and Edomite, and in Phoenician. They follow the same pattern. So that's unto Eliashib. Now, a few other letters. Notice these are easy ones to recognize. The Aleph is an A laid on its side. The Lamed has a tail up above it. The Yod is a small little letter. The Sheen looks like a W. And then the Baith looks like a open safety pin. Down here, this letter that looks like a circle that's kind of oval-like, what do you think that might be? Not a Samic. Here's what a Samic looks like right here. This column here, if you look here, this is a Samic. The top goes from Aleph all the way over to Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samic, Ayin, Pei, Tzadi, Kof, Resh, Shin, Tau. So Samic is here. This one here is an Ayin. It's the shape of the eye. Ayin means eye. And so it stands out right away. So anytime you see it, you know what it is. This with the top on it here, like an axe, that's the Kof. And then this that looks like a box with lines through it, that's the Cheth. The one that looks like a comb or looks like a backwards E, it almost looks like the E on my Dell computer, except it's reversed. It's tipped and reversed. That is the Hay. That's the Hay. And then the one that has the teeth at the top of it here, like this one here, up here at the end of the second line, that's a Mem. That's a Mem. You see it also on down lower and in here as well, a Mem. So they're easy ones to recognize. The Baith and the Resh create the biggest problem because the Baith curves at the bottom and the Resh is straight, but otherwise they have the same top on them. The Tau is easy to recognize. The Tau is an X. The Tau is an X. All right? So study these, look them over. We'll be looking at a few more here as well. Jeremy?
So I'm a little confused as to which ones we need to know for the test. Is it the ones that you got the arrows below? Or
I'm not telling you which ones you need to know for the test. You can, what I'm asking you is on the test, I will give you a document like this one. You will circle 5 of the letters that you recognize. So it's your choice of the 5. In other words, I don't tell you circle an Aleph. You tell me, I recognize an Aleph, I recognize a Lamed, I recognize this, I recognize that. I only ask you for the 5 you recognize.
Can you recognize 5?
Is that clear? Pardon?
Do you recognize 5 olives?
No, you cannot. They have to be 5 different letters. Now, Soon's trying to get ahead there, right? No, I just give you a text and you circle 5 letters that you recognize, 5 different letters that you recognize. So it's your choice. It's your choice. So I'm not asking you to memorize all 22 letters. I'm asking you to memorize sufficient. You better memorize more than 5. Because what if I give you a text that doesn't have one of the letters you memorized? So I would suggest you get to where you can recognize a half dozen to 10 of them at least. All right? Sean, you had a question?
That was my question.
That's your question. Okay, good. And that's probably what Jeremy wanted to find out too. How many do I need to do to be ready for the test? 6 to 10, you'll be ready for the test. Do 10, you'll be safe. All right? Here's another copy of the same one to Eliashib. And it mentions the ships of Kittim. And Kittim is Cyprus. It's the name for Cyprus used in Genesis 10:4, used in Jeremiah 2:10. Another one of the ostraka number 18, is also to Eliashib. That tells you Eliashib must have been an important person at Arad. He's the one who's receiving all of these communications. The interesting one about this one is down at the bottom, we have a Baith, a Yod, a Tau, a word marker, a Yod, Hey, Wow, Hey. House of Yahweh, Beit Yahweh. the house of Yahweh. It's referring to the temple in Jerusalem. This was written at the time the Babylonians were attacking Palestine, attacking Israel. And part of these are accounts of what is happening at the time. Here's a temple receipt mentioning silver of Tarshish. And as you look at this receipt, what letter is it that has this long tail up here? The Lamed. What's the X? That's a tau. That's a tau. What's this one that looks like an open safety pin? That's the Beth. What's this one? That's the Aleph, Zay on its side. What's this one? Sheen. Sheen, right. What's the one that isn't the open safety pin? That's the Resh, same as we have it here. Okay? So, Resh right there. So we have Kesef. This is notice the 3 lines here and down. This is the Samic. You have the Kaf. The Kaf is very interesting. It looks like a hand. Your children may draw stick figures, and they don't put all 5 fingers on the end of the hand. They may just put 2 or 3 fingers out there. Well, that's what that Kaf is representing. It's representing an arm with a hand and the fingers out there. And Kaf means hand. Yad is the hand from the wrist up. Kaf is primarily here. Yad can sometimes go from the elbow up. Zeroah is the entire arm. And Kaf is usually the palm. But if you hold your palm up this way, that's where you get the letter Kaf. Like you're saying how, or peace, shalom, whatever. And so the Kaf comes out that way. That very first one there has that. Notice the 3 little fingers here and the arm here of it, the forearm. That's Kaf, Samic, Pei. The Pei is just straight here and curved down. It doesn't close at the top. It's straight at the top and curves down. That is the Pei. And then the Tau, Resh, Sheen is Tarshish. Now, why isn't there a word break between Kesef and Tarshish? Construct state. That's the same reason there's no word break between Beit Dawid on the Tel Dan stela. It's not a different word. It is the house of David. Because in construct, the word divider is not utilized. Because in construct, the 2 words in construct are pronounced as one word. Pronounced as one word. And at the end, to the house of Yahweh. Again, Lamed, Beth, Yod, Tau, Yod, He, Wow, He. Okay? And the silver of Tarshish parallels 1 Kings 10:22 and Jeremiah 10:9. Then we go to the Jordan Valley to a place called Deir Alla. At Deir Alla, during excavations, they found at the base of a wall a pile of material that was a plaster. And as they were looking at this plaster in all these tiny little pieces, as they carefully separated them and lifted them up, they found writing on the plaster. And the writing on it said, the sayings of Balaam, son of Beor, the man who was a seer of the gods. Right out of Numbers chapters 22 to 24. And this dates back to the 8th century BC, so it's about 600 years after Balaam. But his memory is retained there. This is an artist's depiction of what the wall would have looked like. And they'd plaster the wall with this white plaster, limestone plaster, and then begin to write on it. And somewhere during that time, an earthquake destroyed part of the wall. And it appears the plaster on the outside of the wall just sloughed off into a pile. And they found a combination of fragments in a pit in the interior, like someone was trying to clean it up, some as well. But there was enough they could put it all back together, a huge jigsaw puzzle. But they managed and were able to put at least most of it back together. Something else. Notice the red color in here. You thought the red letter Bible that you have at home that shows the words of Jesus is the first of its kind? The red letters are used here. Balaam, the son of Beor, the man who was the seer of the gods, is placed in red script. And that shows you why he's being memorialized here. They view him as a holy man, as a prophet. Of course, we know all the things that went on with him. He didn't turn out to be such a great guy after all, but he's still considered a hero by the pagans who were living in the area, and for years afterwards, they continued to remember him, memorialize him. The Moabite stone is something you may have heard about. It was discovered by Sir William Flinders Petrie as he was wandering around Palestine. And it was one of those things that when it was discovered, there was a bunch of Bedouins who were at a campfire. I hope I have this not mixed up with someone else. I think it was William Flinders Petrie. But anyway, when it was discovered, the man who discovered it, he came to a campfire, and there were Bedouins gathered around it, and they were taking cold water from a well in cups and pouring it on the stone that was laying in the fire. And he asked them what they were doing. And they said, "We're trying to get to the treasure that is inside the stone." And he said, "Well, how do you know there's a treasure in the stone?" They said, "Because there's writing on the outside of it, and we've always been told if you find a stone with writing on it, inside there are jewels and valuables. There's a treasure in it." Well, he was able to recover it and convince them not to break it up anymore with the cold water on the hot stone. And it was then reassembled in the pieces that were broken off and put together. And this inscription begins, "I am Mesha, son of Chemoshiat, king of Moab the Dibonite." And it goes on to talk about that Omri was king of Israel, that the men of Gad had lived in the land of Ataros since time immemorial. This is right out of the Old Testament. 2 Kings 3, 4-5 talk about Omri paying tribute to the king of Israel, or not Omri, excuse me, Mesha paying tribute to the king of Israel. And we have also in Numbers 32-34 that the men of Gad lived in the land of Ataroth. So this is confirming what the biblical record says. And this dates from approximately 840 BC. It's about the same date as the Tel Dan stele, about the same date as the black obelisk of Shalmaneser III. Whitney?
Are there vowel pointings? Or I guess, I know this was before the Masoretes inserted them, but do all vowels correspond to a full letter in this script?
There are no vowels in this script except as full letter vowels, like a hey being used for a comet, a wow being used for a shurik or a holum. There are no vowel pointings. Okay? And keep in mind, this is Moabite, not Hebrew here. Okay? It's written in Moabite, it's using the same script as Paleo-Hebrew script. So as you read it, as you look at it, you can see here at the top, for example, you have an aleph, you have a nun, you have a kaf, that hand with the fingers, anok, anoki, I. And then you have a mem, sheen, and ayin. Mem, sheen, and ayin. Mesha. Baith, noon. Ben, sun. Kaf, mem, sheen, chemosh, son of Chemosh. A space here because there's a piece missing, which they figure was probably yat in there, which is an ending. And then, whoops, what happened? Go back here. And then you have mem, lamed, kaf, melech, king, no word divider because it's in construct, king of, mem, aleph, baith, Moab. Moab.
That was the root of my question because I didn't see an O up there on Moab.
Right.
It just
No. It won't be put in unless it's needed for meaning. For example, on the pool of Siloam inscription, the word ish, man, in Hebrew we spell it aleph yod shin. It's got a hirik yod in the middle. In the Siloam inscription, ish is spelled aleph shin, no yod. But od, which means again, still, or up to, requires the middle wow to be understood, because if you just leave the ayin daleth, that means witness. So you have to have the aleph, the ayin wow daleth to make it od up to. So in the same inscription, it is fully spelled. Okay? All right. Yes?
It was F.A. Klein who was the one who discovered that. He was a medical missionary.
Okay, Klein, not Flinders Petrie. Thank you. You wrote your paper on this on the Moabite stone, didn't you?
No, just
Or who did?
the articles that I read.
Okay. Did someone write a paper on that? You did, right? Brian, right? Okay. And it was Klein, right? Found it. Thank you. Good. Thanks for bringing it up, Steve.
Probably the most significant inscription on there was a reference to the House of David. They determined that from another finding that they
Right.
one part of it was
Correct. And that wasn't really brought out emphatically until after the Tel Dan stela was published. It was one of those findings that people were debating about, and they actually did not reveal until after they had the Tel Dan stela, and the debate started then, and all of a sudden we discovered 2 or 3 others that have House of David, including the Moabite stone. Right. Good. Thank you. All right. More epigraphic light, and you don't have handouts for this. I gave you the one set, and we're just going to rush through these here, but give you some ideas of a few more things. As you're looking at this, notice it's very easy to read. Notice the word divider here is like a line instead of a dot. The Baith, right there at the beginning, Sheen, Tau. And then you have the Hey, the Ayin, the Sheen, the Resh, and the Tau. And the Mem, Aleph, and the Zayin. Notice the Zayin is kind of like a Z, but it has a little tail on the lower right. It's the last letter there in that top line, right over here. And then you have a Hey here, and then this looks like it's propping up the Lamed. That's another word divider. It just looks confused because it slides into the Lamed. But you have the Lamed here, and then this is a Gimel. And if you're looking at Greek, what does a capital Gamma look like? It's the reverse of that, isn't it? Looks like the hangman's gallows. Comes over. It's the reverse of it. You just flip it over, and you have the capital Gamma. And that's where you get it. It's just a moving of the letter, and that provides us with the Greek alphabet. And from there, we move on into our English alphabet in various ways. And so you have a Gamma, a Delta, now Gamma and Delta, a Gimel and a Daleth. That's what I was talking about, Gamma and Delta, which have the same forms, basically. And then a Yod, and then at the end here, a Wow. So you have Gedi to Gediyah, and then you have, go back here, a Nun. The Nun has this little top here. Notice it's not like the Kaf. The Kaf has 3 fingers up there. The Nun looks like almost a strike of lightning here, and it's curved at the bottom. And a Baith and a Lamed. Nebel is a bottle or a skin. It can be a skin container to put liquids in. And then you have Sheen and Mem, and then the Nun for Shemen, oil, comes on the next line, and the word divider, and Rachatz, this is a Tzadeh, Resh, Cheth, Tzadeh, for pure. Rachatz means to cleanse, to purify. So you have pure olive oil, refined oil. The Siloam inscription, as you look at it, right there in the middle it says, El Reo, unto his brother, Webeod, and up to Shalosh, 3 Amot cubits. And then you have Lehek, and you miss out what's the rest. That could be for the carving from Hakah. And then an ayin at the end. The rest of the word is lost here because you can see this big gap up here. And the ayin at the end probably is at the end of a form of shama, because the very next word is kol, kof lamed. The voice of each, esh, and then a kof, and then it wraps around, and you have a resh and an aleph calling al unto Reo, his fellow, his companion. Ki, that. Hayat, you are. And then it's talking about how that they're very near and they can hear the sounds. And it goes on down to finally describe how they come together. And at the time they're coming together, it's garzen al garzen. Pickaxe to pickaxe. They got to a place where there were 3 cubits. That'd be 4.5 feet, a little bit less than 2 meters, distance between the 2 work gangs that were moving from 2 different ends of the tunnel. And as they were moving together through 2 different ends of the tunnel, then finally they got to a place where they could hear each other on opposite sides of the remaining rock. And as they broke through, they were breaking through pickaxe on pickaxe directly together. And then it goes on down to describe it and to talk about how that this is Bemeatayim, 200 and 1,000 cubits from the time of the going out of the source of the water to the pool. So 1,200 cubits distance from the source, the Gihon spring, at one end of the tunnel to where the pool is, the pool is on the other end of the tunnel. And all of this is inscribed on this inscription from the pool of Siloam. How many of you have been to Israel and walked through the Hezekiah's water tunnel that this is for? Okay, a couple of you have. It's a fascinating experience. And as you go through there, you can imagine what it was like. And as you walk through, on the left, on occasion, there is a passage that starts out and it stops within 3 to 4 feet. That was the wrong angle. Supervisor finally got the men on the right track, said, back up, start over back here, you're going the wrong line. And they began to work. In this inscription itself, it says, the sound is more to the right. It says, meyamin, it's more to the right, it's more to the right. And so they began to work that way. When they heard the sounds, they would say to each other, okay, go more to the right, we hear the sound over there. And that's the way they finished it up at the very end. And you can actually go through and you can watch the point. It took me twice through the tunnel before I could identify the point exactly. But the second time through the tunnel, I didn't have a lot of other people. It was just myself and one other student there. And we were the last ones of the day. They shut it off at the other end and said, no one else is coming through after you. There's a group of high school students from Jerusalem that were ahead of us. We let them get way ahead so we could blow out our candles and see what it would be like in the dark. And then we went on through and we watched carefully where the chisel marks, you can see the point at which the chisel marks are going one direction and the other direction, opposite each other, and you can pick out approximately the area where they would meet. It's a fascinating experience to see there. The Tel Siran bottle was found in 1972 in an excavation on the campus of the University of Jordan in Amman. And on it, you can see the same type of script. This is Ammonite language, written in the same script, Paleo-Hebrew script, the old Phoenician script. Ammonite, Moabite, Edomite, Hebrew, and Phoenician, and Aramaic. 6 different languages we know of. There may be more eventually. 6 different languages written with the identical script at this period of time. You learn this script, and you can read many of these languages. There's just a few different forms and the verbs, a few different pieces of vocabulary, and a few other nouns that are a little bit different, but you can begin to pick them out. And this says the works of Abinadab, king of the Ammonites. And as you look at it here, you can pick out king. There's your meme with that little top on it there. The meme, there's your lamed, and there's your kaf with the 3 fingers. And you have here king of Bain Ammoni. So you have as you go through it, you have all the things there. Aminadab, Ayin Mem Nun, Daleth Baith, Melech Ben Ammoni. Yes, question, Steve? This is Ammonite. Ammonite. The others, Edomite, Moabite. We saw Moabite on the Moabite stone. I don't have any Edomite inscriptions here to show you. Ammonite, Hebrew. We have the Hebrew. We have Aramaic, like on the Tel Dan stele, and Phoenician. This is another Ammonite inscription from the citadel at Amman. Dates back to about the same period of time, 850 to 800 BC, and begins with the name of the god of the Ammonites, Milcom. Milcom. The last letters you see there, as you get into the inscription, you have a lamed, because up above the line, a kaf, and a mem. And as you go on through here, you can see here's a lamed and a kaf right there. Lamed kaf probably is either lake, go, or to you, or for you. You can see the aleph, the tau, there's a samic, these are baiths. You can pick these out quite easily as you're going through. Here's a mem. Okay. And of course a daleth right there. And ayin, shaped like an eye. The Yavna Yam Astrakhan, found in 1960 south of Tel Aviv, talks about the, excuse me, back this up here, talks about a workman who has had to give up his cloak as a guarantee that he will repay a loan. And it's an inscription that informs the person who has the cloak in his possession, that he must give it back to the worker at nightfall, because otherwise the worker will not have anything to sleep in. And that ties in with the law of Moses that talks about the same thing. You don't take a man's cloak away from him as a down payment for something, or as a guarantee that he's going to pay you a loan that he owes. You have to give it back to him to sleep in again at night. Otherwise, you'll end up with a dead person, and then what good is your loan? You know? But you're supposed to also show compassion. Compassion. He's been in a hard spot. That's why he borrowed from you. And you be compassionate and make certain he has that cloak to sleep with. When we go to the Egyptian materials, one of the materials you should be familiar with and know its site is the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone is inscribed at the top in Egyptian hieroglyphics. The middle is Demotic. The Demotic is a type of cursive, simplified reproduction of hieroglyphics. And the bottom is Greek. This was found by Napoleon's soldiers when they were camped at the mouth of the Nile at the Rosetta branch of the Nile River, and that's why it's called the Rosetta Stone. They were excavating to build a fort and discovered it. And it provided the key then for Champollion to go ahead and confirm the deciphering of Egyptian hieroglyphics by comparing the Greek with it here with the hieroglyphic text, because he found out that the names of individuals that were given in the Greek, when he knew they were names, he could go back to the hieroglyphics and he found the names were always put in a cartouche. The cartouche was kind of like a circular or oblong circle around something, and had a bar on one side of it. Looked like it was tied on with ropes, so it's like bending a piece of reed around and then tying at one end. And he found names in those, and that allowed him then to figure out what Egyptian letters represented what sounds in the Greek, and to move from there then to decipher the entire language. The Amarna letters, we talked about them. Those were found in Egypt at Akhetaten. They were found in a place where the Egyptian pharaohs evidently had a temple area and also an administrative building. And these were correspondences, letters from the kings in the land of Palestine and elsewhere who were writing to Akhenaten and writing to other pharaohs in the same period of time, in the 1400s to 1200s BC, the 13th to 15th centuries BC. And talking to them about difficulties they had, problems with the Habiru, as some of them wrote about. Get letters here from the king at Jerusalem, for example, the king of Hatzor, the king at Shechem, and other places, all involved. Here's a letter to Amenhotep III of Egypt from the king of Alashia, Cyprus. And you can see the cuneiform was used. This is written in Akkadian. So it shows that the Egyptian court was conversant with Akkadian. Akkadian was the lingua franca of the day. And even those in Egypt had to learn it. In Egypt, you also have things like the Book of the Dead, which began as pyramid texts written on the walls of the tombs of the pharaohs buried within the pyramids. And then as they built coffins for them, especially those that were made of wood at later date, they would still inscribe the same texts in the inside of the coffin, and then eventually in book form on papyrus. And that's why it's called now the Book of the Dead. But it has to do with incantations and prayers to the gods and instructions about how to ensure the immortality of the soul of the individual who's being buried in this place. It includes magical spells that are to be recited at the time of the mummification of the body, and to enable the facilitation of the future resurrection of this individual, and to protect him from all the perils that he will face in the afterlife. You'll have to ask them. The Bubastite portal dates to the 10th century BC, found at Karnak in the temple of Amun. Amun is the god there that is depicted in the middle of this portion. Notice that he has ropes in his hands that go back behind him and tie together with groups of people behind him with cartouches vertically on their body where their names are given. And there you have a list of those peoples that the Pharaoh of Egypt had conquered in the name of Amun. 150 place names in Canaan and the Negev are located here, paralleling many of those things that we find in 1 Kings chapter 14 and 2 Chronicles chapter 12 about Shishak. Shishak, or Shoshenq, the first, is the Pharaoh here that's being talked about. He's the one who is mentioned. He's a mighty warrior. And you'll find on here, for example, Megiddo is one of the sites that you have a person listed as. When you go to Egypt, you go up the Nile River to Thebes. You find on the west side is where you have the Valley of the Kings. It's up here on the upper left. And here you have Deir el-Bahari, which is the temple of Hatshepsut, and the Valley of the Kings in here. And the King Tut's tomb is located in here, in this area. Thutmose IV, Merneptah, the same one famous for the Merneptah stele, and the temple of Ramses III. And the Colossus of Memnon, these two statues here are located in that area. And then you have Karnak, and the temple of Amun at Karnak is on the east side of the river. And this shows you another drawing, lets you see a little bit more of the layout of the area. On public television from time to time, they have a documentary that plays, I think, about once every 3 months. And it is about a village of workers who dug the Valley of the tombs, the Valley of Kings. And they lived back in a valley that's back over in this region and on up in here. And they would walk to work every day. And that whole village where they lived has all been excavated. And their way of life and everything is just fascinating to read about and see. And if you have an opportunity to watch that sometime, it will give you a greater appreciation of perhaps the type of life that the Hebrew slaves lived in when they were in Egypt. Because this is a history, this is a village of slaves that are being used to dig the tombs in the Valley of Kings. Elephantine papyri are Aramaic papyrus documents, including things like contracts, including personal letters, including marriage contracts. A Passover papyrus that talks about the observance of the Passover among the Jews at Elephantine. It's on an island in the Nile, and they have a temple that is built there. And the interesting thing about this temple is the inscriptions in it are combining the name of Yahweh with the Egyptian gods. It is syncretistic religion. It's a mixture of Judaism and pagan Egyptian religion. The execration text found on the pillars and walls at Karnak in the temple there on the east side of the Nile River across from the Valley of the Kings includes curses on their enemies called execration texts. Execration texts are also found on bowls, where you have a bowl and circling the bowl on the inside is written an inscription, usually in Aramaic. There are Aramaic incantations that are found in the bowls, and there are curses on enemies. And the idea was that if you would put water in that bowl and wash off part of the ink, the curse of the words would wash into the ink, and then you put that water in something your enemy is going to drink, and it's supposed to kill him. What does that remind you of? It reminds you of the process of uncovering the adulteress in the book of Numbers by making her drink the water that has some dust in it, and it's supposed to make her belly swell if she is lying about the fact that she wasn't an adulterer. Go back to the book of Numbers and read it. It's the same type of imagery being used. And so some have suggested, well, maybe that's what it is, an incantation. Well, I don't think you can look at it that way in the Old Testament. There you have the act of God. God is the one who is going to do this. It's not the matter of an incantation or words being swallowed by her. It's that God is the one who's going to reveal it, and this is the ceremony through which then God will do the work and reveal. The Merneptah stele, another one you need to recognize by eyesight. You can recognize it by the two mirror image representations at the top of the stela. This is the god Amun. Notice the tall double-crowned hat. And he is handing a scepter to Merneptah. So it's mirror image. It's like you're looking at it in a mirror. And behind Merneptah is another god here with its staff. I believe it's the god Thoth, and the god of truth. And standing behind Merneptah is receiving the scepter, symbolic of receiving the kingdom. And this is a stela that is celebrating his defeat of the Libyan invaders. It's the only occurrence of Israel. By the way, the mummy, the beautiful mummy up there, the handsome guy up there at the upper right is Merneptah. That's his mummy. It's been uncovered and identified. That's the first and earliest mention in the ancient Near East of Israel in any inscription. You can see a representation of this in the Israel Museum. And as you look at it, look toward the bottom of the inscription, and you can pick it out there. And you can see how it's written. And the debate over this has to do with the fact that it begins with these two plumes from the reeds that represent the sound E. You have a bar there representing the sound S. And then the Re at the bottom there, Isre, E, the single one because it's not initial. And then this is what we'd call a double aleph at the end. That's why it looks like a little 3 there. The double aleph at the end is Israel. And so Israel represents Israel. Israel. And you have another R there on the end, Israel, because you have that liquid confusion. There is no L in Egyptian, just an R. And so to say Israel, you use Israel. And then at the end, you have a throwing stick, a man and a woman, and the 3 symbols there of a land. And it's because this throwing stick is normally taken as being a nomadic hunting implement, then this is often interpreted as being nomads, therefore not having a land of their own. However, there are also other peoples mentioned in the inscriptions in Egyptian that have exactly the same determinative on them that are definitely settled peoples in settled lands. So it could be a reference back to their origin rather than to their current state. They came as nomads into the land, whether you're taking it as Abraham coming into the land or whether you're taking about them returning from Egypt. But at this time, they are settled in the land. And so the debate on this stela is to say, well, look, Merneptah is 1200 BC and the Israelites aren't settled in the land yet. That's the argument for the late date of the Exodus. But it all falls apart when you study this determinative and see that the same thing is used of settled peoples that are definitely settled. There's no argument about it. And then as you understand that perhaps this is one of the determinatives used to kind of illustrate or refer to their past known history. All right. Now, you've been asked before to memorize. I'm going to begin this, and we're going to take a break here in 4 minutes. But you've been asked to memorize before certain dates on this timeline. What is the first date that you're asked to memorize here? How about Whitney? Can you tell us? What's the first date you were asked to memorize here? Middle Bronze. Middle Bronze Age. All right. Justin, what's the Middle Bronze Age represent biblically? The patriarchal period. All right. What does the second date that you're asked to memorize represent? Adrian? Okay, actually here's just a little bit before Moses. So you put Moses here. I'd put Moses here. Moses to the midpoint of the Judges. Okay, Moses to the Judges. All right, for the late Bronze Age. Okay, Iron Age 1. Andy?
Judges through the monarchy.
Okay, Judges through the monarchy. Finishes up the Judges and goes into monarchy, dealing with Saul and David. And it's just before, actually, David finishes after this, but David has begun reigning at this time. And then Iron Age 2, Jeremy Kidder, Iron Age 2 up there, 1000 to 586 represents what biblical period?
Captivity.
Okay, the divided kingdom is the easiest way to refer to it. Divided kingdom. It is from the monarchy to the Babylonian captivity. But the easiest way to refer to it is just as the divided kingdom. Okay? So those are the 4 dates. Make certain that you have reviewed that and have that ready for the final exam. It was on the last quiz. Go back and study that. I may not give it in the same order the same way. So be ready for it. All right. Now, let's test your memory of what you have seen. And some of these will be new to you. But that's part of the reason for reviewing and going over them, is to make certain you know them. Bill, tell me which of these you recognize. Give me one that you recognize. Tell me which one and tell me what it is.
The one at the top
Top which?
with the Egyptian figures, isn't that the
Okay, the middle at the top?
isn't that, I'm trying to pronounce the Amenhotep,
Not Amenhotep. Merneptah. Merneptah. Steve had it there right next to you. Okay, the Merneptah stele. That was one we were just looking at. Okay, so the middle one there at the top is the Merneptah stele. Merneptah stele. Okay? Jay, pick out one more and tell me what it is.
Top right is Moabite stone.
Okay, the top right is the Moabite stone. I am Mesha, king of Moab. The Mesha stone, or the Moabite stone. Okay? So we have 2 on the top there identified. Tim, Roni, pick one more and identify it. You only have 4 left.
Is that the Ebla on the bottom left, the yellow?
The bottom left is not Ebla. No. All right. Let's try Brian.
The lower right, either black or west.
Say that again. The lower right is what?
The black of the west.
The black obelisk of Shalmaneser III. Correct. Remember, here's either Jehu or Joram bowing down at the feet of Shalmaneser III, who's offering up this, who's receiving the tribute of this gold vessel. Okay, the black obelisk of Shalmaneser on the lower right. Question soon?
Is black obelisk good enough, or you must say black obelisk of Shalmaneser?
I want black obelisk of Shalmaneser III. Okay? S-H-A-L, Shalmaneser. S-H-A-L-M-A-N-E-Z-E-R. Shalmaneser the third. Yes, Jeremy?
I just want to make sure it's the same guy. I was taught it was pronounced Shalmaneser.
No, it's Shalmaneser. Right.
So that would be the same.
Same guy, yes. Correct. Same one. All right. All right. Black obelisk of Shalmaneser III. So we have 3 of the 6 identified. PJ, can you identify another one of the remaining 3? You've seen 2 of these, I know, before. One you may not have seen yet.
Did you identify the one on the far left?
The far left? What is it? Do you know? No, it's not the Rosetta Stone. Mike McCune?
I know the other one says House of David, but that's all I know.
Aha, House of David, that's right. Exactly. You have here Beit David. Okay? Beth, Yod, Tau, Daleth, Wow, Daleth. What is that? Tel Dan stela. The Tel Dan stela. Okay? Tel Dan stela. Okay, we have 2 left. We have the one on the far left, and we have the one in the middle at the bottom. Who can identify the middle at the bottom? We saw it in one quick slide some time ago. Go ahead, Sengnan. Pardon? The Gezer calendar, right. The Gezer calendar. And at the beginning of every line it has Yod, Resh, Cheth, Yerach. It's found in Jericho, city of the moon. Moon meaning month. The month of the harvest of this, the month of the harvest of that. The Gezer tablet, G-E-Z-E-R, G-E-Z-E-R, Gezer tablet. So the Gezer calendar, okay? Our agricultural calendar. Okay, that's the middle one here at the bottom, the gray one right here, that's the Gezer tablet. All right, no one's identified the one on the left. Who? Not Sargon. The Code of Hammurabi. Sagnon has it. See, you've got to go to Myanmar to learn these things, see? The Kachin man knows it. Right, the Code of Hammurabi. At least be close. Be close. Okay? Hammurabi, H-A-M-M-U-R-A-B-I or P-I. It doesn't matter. Okay? Just be close. Just make it recognizable, okay? Don't give me Merneptah for Hammurabi. All right? Okay. So this is something that you might see on a final exam. Now, let's go to this. Can you identify these? This takes you back to textual criticism. All right? Textual criticism. Steve, in the back, you recognize one of them.
Bottom right is the Aleppo Codex.
The bottom right, down here. Are you sure it's the Aleppo Codex?
Pretty sure.
Okay. He says the Aleppo Codex is at least a Hebrew manuscript, correct?
Yes.
All right? Good. I'll give you the answers here in a minute. We'll come back to the answers. I have slides here for the answers. All right? Got a Hebrew manuscript. Can you identify any of the other three? Who can identify the bottom left? What kind of manuscript is that? It's Paleo-Hebrew stylized. Who did that? Who wrote the, let's see, let me think here. I know who it was. Who wrote about the Samaritan Pentateuch? Where are you? Ah, there we go, George. You should have recognized that right away. Okay, good. Okay, Samaritan Pentateuch right here. Samaritan Pentateuch, that's Samaritan script. Notice how it all is even here at the side in the margin. That's what we were noticing at the time we were looking at it. All right. What about the top right? Go ahead, Joe. The Syriac Peshitta. Okay, the top left. What language is it, number one? Greek. So you have three choices. It's a Septuagint, but remember the three manuscripts, Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, and Alexandrinus. How do you identify them? A, B, S, alphabetically, and numerically, 2, 3, 4. So what does it make it? Vaticanus. 3 columns is Vaticanus. 2 is Alexandrinus, represented by A. B represents Vaticanus, which is 3 columns, and 4 is represented by the S, alphabetically. Sinaiticus is the 4 columns. So 2 columns, 3 columns, 4 columns. A, B, S. A, Alexandrinus. B, Vaticanus. S, Sinaiticus. 2 columns, Alexandrinus. 3 columns, Vaticanus. 4 columns, Sinaiticus. This has 3 columns, therefore is Codex Vaticanus. All right, now let's go back here so it makes certain that you have all of these in. First of all, the timeline. Make certain you have these down. The patriarchal period is Middle Bronze Age, 2200 to 1550 BC. The Mosaic to early Judges, or Mosaic to Judges, you don't need to put early in there, is Late Bronze Age, 1550 to 1200. 1200 to 1000 is the Judges to the monarchy. And Iron Age 2 is the monarchy to divided kingdom, or you can just put in divided kingdom, because the only monarchy left there, you got part of the reign of David and the reign of Solomon and Rehoboam in there, but still you can go either way. Just, you know, as long as you have something in there. If you have monarchy to the captivity, that's fine. The Babylonian captivity, not the Assyrian captivity. Remember, the Assyrian captivity is 722 BC, and this is 586 BC. But those are the 4 areas of time you have to be familiar with. And please remember, when you write the numbers of the years, put BC. Put BC. Okay? Something else while I'm thinking about it. When you're doing your quiz, and actually it's the final exam, when you're doing the final exam, never give me more than I ask for. Okay? I mentioned that last week. I just want to mention it one more time. If I ask for 3 things, give me only 3, don't give me 4. If I ask for 1, only give me 1, don't give me 2. All right? The identification of these 6, Code of Hammurabi, Merneptah stele, the Mesha inscription or Moabite stones, known by both names, the Tel Dan stele, the Gezer tablet or Gezer calendar, and the black obelisk of Shalmaneser III. I don't know why the third isn't there, but should be. Yes, Whitney.
What's the exact images we're going to see? Like, the top right's a drawing, we won't see a photograph or...
I'm not telling you what you'll see. It'll be recognizable. That's all I can tell you. It'll be recognizable. Okay? Yes?
Along those lines, I was just going to ask, are these the only ones we're going to have to worry about as far as the identification is concerned?
Correct.
As far as pictures? Oh, okay. Great. But there's
as far as
other
pictures.
things to know stuff about.
Right. Yeah, you'll need to know stuff about other things, but these, for pictures, you should be able to eyeball them and recognize them by sight. Some of these are also in your textbook by Archer. Question, Stephen?
How big is the black obelisk?
The black obelisk of Shalmaneser, I believe, stands about 5-6 feet high. Yes, James.
When we identify these, do you just want the name, or what would you like us to identify them?
Just give me what I asked for. Normally, on the pictures, I'm just asking the name, just what you see here. Now, in other parts, I may be asking other things. Like another part of the exam, I may say, now, what's the significance of the Merneptah stele? And so you have to tell me the significance of the Merneptah stele. It's the only mention of Israel by name, the earliest mention of Israel by name in the ancient Near East. Okay? All right? Yes, Whitney?
The inscriptions slash
Moabite stone. Both names are, you can use one or the other. Okay? You can put either name. You don't have to put both, just either one. Okay? Any other question on these? All right. And by the way, the Rosetta Stone that we were looking at earlier, that's another one you should be able to recognize by sight. It's the only one that has 3 columns of writing, one across the top, one across the middle, one at the bottom. And another way is because the fact that I think, and the only picture I have of it to use for an exam, it says hieroglyphics, Demotic, Greek. It's a giveaway. Unless between now and then one of you sends me a better picture without that on it. Who knows? But the Rosetta Stone would be the one additional to these that I would expect you to recognize. You should be well familiar with that from past studies in history. Okay, the Septuagint, Codex Vaticanus, Syriac Peshitta, Samaritan Pentateuch, and Masoretic Hebrew manuscript. That's because this is not the Aleppo Codex, sorry. This is actually a text from the Book of Numbers, which does not exist in the Aleppo Codex. This is Codex Leningradensis, B19a. But all I'm asking on this is that you recognize the type of witness. Syriac Peshitta, Codex Vaticanus, because of the columns and the language, and Samaritan Pentateuch, because of the style of script, and the Masoretic Hebrew manuscript. So that's all you need to know. Basically, languages I'm looking for here. See that you recognize the witnesses. The Syriac looks like Arabic, someone said. Greek you should recognize by now. The Hebrew you should recognize by now. Samaritan Pentateuch is the only one that's an oddball, and always look for that evened out column on the left. That's the dead giveaway for the Samaritan Pentateuch. Okay. Any other questions here? Yes, Justin?
What were the other 2 versions of the Septuagint?
The Codex Alexandrinus. Alexandrinus has 2 columns normally. And Sinaiticus. Sinaiticus normally has 4 columns. Okay. Whitney?
Would B519 or 519A work?
B19A?
B19A. Go.
Leningrad B19A. At least have the Leningrad in there. Right? But here, all I'm asking on this is Masoretic Hebrew manuscript, because in the context of these other manuscripts. I'm not asking you to identify which specific manuscript. For example, I'm not asking you to identify which manuscript of the Syriac Peshitta is this. The only one I'm asking you that on is the Greek, because they're so characteristic because of the columns. Okay? You get that down, you can go to a museum and impress someone by recognizing the manuscript at a distance before you even get to it. James?
I'm sorry, what kind of script was this? Samaritan Pentateuch?
That's Syriac, or Samaritan Pentateuch, excuse me. Samaritan Pentateuch down here, it is a Paleo-Hebrew script that has been changed. It's stylized. It's not exactly like the Paleo-Hebrew you're learning for the one part of the exam, but it's similar to it. It's similar to it. For example, here you can see this is a baith. It looks like the open safety pin right there. This is a resh. It's the same thing, but the tail comes down instead of curving up. This is an aleph. This is a hay. And as you begin looking at some of these, you can pick out certain letters that are very similar. You can see the lamed is up above the line here. The lamed is up above the line. You have another one over here, though, it's above the line, too, that is not the lamed. But they're different forms. It's not identical to the Paleo-Hebrew script, but it's a stylized form of it. Specialized form. Okay? All right. Your final exam study guide is at the end of your syllabus. And you should have that there now. And I want to go through this with you and make certain you understand what I'm asking, what I'm saying, all the way through. Number one, be certain you go back and review all of your quizzes. We're going to have a few minutes here, just a little bit, for you to ask any questions that are remaining on your quizzes. Review Archer in Survey of Old Testament Introduction, chapter 8, the authorship of the Pentateuch on pages 113 to 26. Make certain you've gone over that with care. Review all your class notes. Be prepared to reproduce the sail hammer template demonstrating the areas of involvement for all types of biblical criticism. You don't have to draw the template. I will provide the templates, just like what you've had in your quizzes. All you'll do is draw the brackets and give the letters for identifying which type of criticism is being represented on the template. So it'll be identical to what you've seen on the last few quizzes. Sean?
There were a couple of the templates you didn't provide in the notes. We discussed
Correct.
them in class, but are those also included in this?
No.
Just the ones that are in the notes?
Just the ones that are in your notes will be included. Okay? All right. That's a good question. And then be prepared to go through the following information. Make certain you know everything that's in this. You're asked to identify each of the following notations. And you have 1Q Isaiah A. Make certain that you can identify these. That the 1 represents the cave number. The Q represents the location, Qumran. The IS represents the book Isaiah. And the A represents the first Isaiah scroll to be found in Cave 1 at Qumran. So 1QPHB represents what? Stephen, Chen, tell me what 1QPHB represents.
Habakkuk commentary at Qumran Cave 1.
Okay, Habakkuk is the HB. The commentary is the lowercase p, stands for Pesher. Pesher. Okay, so it's the commentary. It's the Habakkuk commentary from Qumran Cave 1. All right? So that's a type of issue that you should know and going through it. And you should be able to find these. All of them are listed in Archer, in your textbook. And then we go to some of the Gothic letters that are given as symbols. And I had the Syriac Peshitta there marked for you. Go back again to some of your studies there. Go back to Old Testament 603, where you went through that. And review these. You can find these listed in the front of any Hebrew Bible. You can find them in any book on textual criticism. You can find them in a number of the different editions of various commentaries, like the International Critical Commentary uses this symbolism. If you have the Stuttgart Electronic Bible in your Logos library, it includes all of these symbols as well. But this top one, the E one there, That is a G, a Gothic G, which stands for what word? Greek. And the Greek stands for then what witness? The Septuagint. Okay, so that is the symbol for Septuagint. The two that are most difficult are F and G, because you have to recognize that the G has a T shape in it. Notice that? That it's a T right there inside the curve. And that T stands for Targum. The other looks like a backward 7. The vertical line comes to the corner of the horizontal line. And that's a C, and it stands for Cairo-Geniza, for the Cairo-Geniza. All right? So make certain you've identified all of these. I gave you also the asterisk and Origen's hexapla, but you have to give me more than that. You have to tell me what was the purpose of the asterisk in Origen's hexapla. All right? Joe Young, can you tell me? Not sure. Okay. How about Patrick O'Neill? Can you tell me? No? Benjamin, can you tell me? Aaron?
When they didn't know what they inserted it when they didn't know something was there.
You're close, but still no reward. Saying we're going to leave the Kachin man for a minute here. I'll tell you, some of you guys need to get close to this guy. He's got these things down. Andy, how about you?
It was something to do with what wasn't recorded in the Septuagint, or...
Close, you're getting close. Soon?
I think it's in the Hebrew, but not in the Septuagint.
It is in the Hebrew, but not in the Septuagint. Okay, it's text that is omitted from the Septuagint that is in the Hebrew. And so Origen then borrowed the Greek translation from a translation that did have it, like Theodotion or Symmachus, and then inserted it in. But it's material that is in the Hebrew, but is absent in the Septuagint. Okay? And then the other little symbols there, that last L throws a lot of students. That capital English L at the bottom there. Charlie, what does it stand for? Not Latin. That's what throws people. All right? That's why I asked. Okay, see if I can get this sunk in your mind here. Steve Hall? Right. Leningrad. Stands for Leningradensis. Codex Leningrad. All right? That's what the capital L stands for. If you want the Latin, you have to go up to the Latin right there, J. The Latin, the Gothic L. That's the Latin. Okay? That's the Latin, the old Latin text. And then, of course, you have the Vulgate, which is that one. I is it's a Gothic V for Vulgate. It's a Latin Vulgate. Okay? Question, Felix? That was it. Okay, good. All right. Briefly describe each of the following: language and date, and the contribution made to Old Testament textual criticism. I gave you the Septuagint and the Targums to give you the pattern of what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for anything extensive. What is the language of the Samaritan Pentateuch, Sandy? You got your hand up, so I called on you. Is the question I'm asking you the question you were going to ask me? Oh, okay. All right. You have the examples there, Septuagint and Targums. Okay, so what's the language for the Samaritan Pentateuch? Look at the name. Samaritan Hebrew. Right? Samaritan Hebrew. What's the date of the Samaritan Pentateuch? How about that, Sengnan?
Samaritan Pentateuch?
Yes. Date?
The date is after...
You didn't have that one down?
No, I
Got it. Go ahead. 400 to 100 BC. 400 to 100 BC. Okay, good. Well, you did well. You did well. Aaron?
Paleo-Hebrew for that? Is that...
No, because Paleo-Hebrew is the script, not the language. Okay? We're talking about language. So that's Samaritan Pentateuch. Samaritan Hebrew is the language. All right? Samaritan Hebrew Pentateuch is from 400 to 100 BC. What's the contribution it makes to Old Testament textual criticism? It's an indirect witness to the Masoretic text of the Pentateuch. So it only applies to the first 5 books of the Old Testament. So it has only a moderate contribution that it makes. Okay? It makes a moderate contribution. All right? And they'll go through and do the same thing with the Hexapla, the Peshitta, the Aquila, and the Vulgate. Go back and check your quiz where you had the dates of all of these witnesses, where you had to arrange them in order. Okay? And review that. Sandy?
For Hexapla, do you want all the languages side by side?
No, the Hexapla is Greek. The Hexapla is in Greek. It's a Greek witness, a Greek testimony. So it's the Hexapla is Greek, and it is by Origen, and it is 230 AD. 230 AD. And it is of a great value to textual criticism. The first column is Hebrew, right, but we're talking about all the rest of it was Greek, and all of his notations and everything are Greek. So just consider it Greek witness. And it was all about the Septuagint. Okay? Yes, Sean.
You want something more than just of great value?
Not necessarily. Just like I have up here, the Septuagint, significant value. Targums, very little value. Just a general category of value. Just don't be way off. Okay? All right? Go back and look at your notes on that for the textual critical aspect. And define the following terms: haplography, dittography, metathesis, homeoteluton, homeoarcton. Remember, that's all in a chart in Archer with definitions. So go back and look at that again. All right? That's all I'm asking for. No, just ask for these 5 for your study. Just follow the study guide. Okay? I'm not going to throw an extra one in there. Those are the 5 I'm interested in. The extra stuff I throw in that are above and beyond your quizzes and your study guide are not going to be things like that. It'll be something far more general and far more something that you should have got or gleaned by the overall look at the class. Now, in 10 words or less, identify the particular contribution or area of Old Testament studies for which the following men are known. I gave you William Foxwell Albright as an example and Jean Astruc as an example. Please keep it brief. Now, most of these men can be found in Archer, but there are some that cannot be found in Archer. Now, what I want to do is to mention a few of them that you may not find and may have difficulty with. And then I'll stop and see if you have other issues here. Cyrus Herzl Gordon. Actually, go 13. 13, Frederikus Field. Frederikus Field is the editor of Origen's Hexapla. He's the modern editor of Origen's Hexapla. Frederikus Field. It's the edition of the Hexapla that we have in the library. So Frederikus Field is the modern editor of the Hexapla. Cyrus Herzl Gordon. Cyrus Gordon is a Ugaritic scholar, and he is also famous for comparing the Old Testament with Homeric studies, the study of Homer. There's a lot more we could say about Cyrus Gordon, but Ugaritic is his primary area, his primary contribution. He wrote a text for the Ugaritic language called the Ugaritic Textbook, novel title, and it's the one that most use to learn Ugaritic with. Cyrus Herzl Gordon. Fascinating man with a fascinating life. During World War II, he worked in the area of spying and espionage. E.A. Spicer did the same thing. It was a fascinating history of these men. Edwin Hatch, number 18. Edwin Hatch, together with Alan Redpath, I believe it's Alan Redpath, are editors of a concordance to the Septuagint. Edwin Hatch is a co-editor of a concordance for the Septuagint. Ernst Wilhelm Hengstenberg's greatest contribution is his Christology, Old Testament Christology. It's called Christology of the Old Testament. The title is Christology of the Old Testament. And it's number 19, Ernst Wilhelm Hengstenberg. He's best known for his Christology of the Old Testament, the study of Christ in the Old Testament. Christology of the Old Testament. He was a pietist, and he has done a number of commentaries, excellent commentaries, on Ecclesiastes, on the Song of Solomon, on Isaiah. His Christology of the Old Testament is available in a Kregel reprint that is condensed and abridged into one volume. If you want the original, there have been a few available out there, 5 volumes. And it is the classic work, studying the doctrine of the Messiah, the doctrine of Christ in the Old Testament. Okay? Ernst Wilhelm Hengstenberg. James B. Pritchard, we talked about the other day in class. Who is he? He's the compiler and editor of ancient Near Eastern texts. Okay? Ephraim Avigdor Spicer, number 27. Spicer is the author of the first volume of the Anchor Bible series, the book of Genesis. And by the way, the Redpath is Henry Redpath, not Alan. In fact, the middle name may be Alan's, Henry A. Redpath, but it's Henry Redpath, and Hatch was the other co-editor. But Spicer is best known for his producing the first volume of the Anchor Bible Commentary, the book of Genesis. He has quite a history. As I said, he was involved in espionage in World War II as well. William Wicks, number 29. William Wicks. He's known for his work on the Hebrew accents. His treatise on Hebrew accents defined the usage of the accents and the distinction between prose accents and poetic accents. It is a classic work. When I was back in Denver teaching at the seminary there was a Jewish library nearby that I would go and visit, and one time I was in there, they said, we've noticed you in here from time to time, and we noticed that you read Hebrew, and you look like you understand a little bit of Yiddish and things like that. We need a catalog of our library. We have a lot of volumes here. We don't know their value, and we would pay you if you would just tell us what kind of volumes we have here, and what do we have in this library that's worthwhile and worth keeping. So I went through all their collections, and I drew up a long inventory and gave an approximate value for a lot of them. They had an original publication of Wicks's treatise on the Hebrew accents from the 1700s. It was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. I was really excited about that. They had a large number of other things. We got down to the end, and the fellow says, okay, turn in the number of hours that you spent on this evaluation and give to us the catalog that you've made. And I did that. And I waited and I waited and I waited, and I didn't hear from them. So finally I recontacted them, and they said, well, I'll check. You're supposed to have been sent something. And so I got hold of them again later, talked to the director, and he said, well, it's gone through the committee, and he says, I'm waiting for approval before we pay you. And I said, fine. So I waited another 2 months and still didn't hear from him. So I went back to him again, and I said, I still haven't heard from you, and you promised to pay me for the work, and I gave you all this work and all the stuff, so what can we do? And he says, well, the committee didn't approve this, he says it wasn't budgeted, and they're not approving the disbursement for it. So I said, well, would you be willing to pay me in kind? Could I be paid in books? And I said, I would not take it for myself personally. I would donate it to my seminary's library where I was teaching, And I said they would go there. So you would be assured they'd still be used by students. And he said, fine. He says, go ahead and do that. So I made up a list of the books, understanding that some of them they'd probably say no to, because I put down some of the valuable ones. There was a 14th century manuscript in there, and a few other things. You know, I shot high. And so I gave him a list, and I said, now, you know, we reached a general category of evaluation. I'd already given them the value of everything, so they could figure out for themselves, okay, what can we give him that would measure up to the value and kind? So this went on for months. And finally, the director, I went in to see the director, and they had a new director. And he didn't seem to know anything about anything that was going on. And so I talked to my president of our seminary and our administrative staff, and I said, what should we do about this, or should we do anything? And we finally agreed, well, let's just drop it. Let's just forget it. Let's leave it alone. So we never got anything for it. But I had great experience. I gained from the experience, and I gained from seeing some of these manuscripts and some of these books that I thought I'd never see. It was really a great time. So you never know. I learned from that, though. Next time you do it, you know, don't give them the results until they give you the pay. Give them a taste of it, but don't give it to them until you got the money in hand. Never had the chance since then. Okay? All right. Going on to the end, briefly describe the significance of the following archaeological discoveries. Much of this you can get right out of Face of Old Testament Studies, as well as right out of Archer. I think, what is it, page 185 or something like that, where in Archer it's 188. Page 188, you have a table there, archaeological evidences to the Old Testament. That's one of the places you can go to get some of that information. I just want it brief, no longer than what I've given you there for the Amarna tablets or for the Qumran scrolls. And you need to put in there the Mari tablets, Nuzi tablets, Babylonian Chronicles, Samaritan Ostraca, Rosh Hashanah tablets, Ebla tablets, Tel Dan stele, Merneptah stele, Moabite stone. Those are the different things to add in there. And you can search for those in Archer, or you can search for them in Face of Old Testament Studies. Stephen? Okay, that is one, excuse me, that is, I haven't gone down here to it. That is a longer one that you need to have a little bit more on. The Ekron inscription is a Philistine inscription from Ekron, one of the 5 cities of the Philistine Pentapolis. And it is one of the rare examples of actually having Philistine language, which, by the way, is written in the same Paleo-Hebrew script, the Ekron inscription. So that's significance. There is an actual inscription that is from the Philistines. Okay? You don't have to have much more than that. If you want more information on it and to see what it looks like, it's not a very large inscription. The full text of it and everything is available online. If you just search for Ekron inscription, there's one of the sites. In fact, I have a link to it, I think, on my website under the links that you can go there, and they have all these inscriptions with all the text and a picture of them as well, and dates and everything, and the Ekron inscription is included. So if you just go to search for Ekron inscription, you'll find it. Those of you maybe not really familiar with how to use the search, the function in your browser, the easiest way to find Ekron inscription is not just to type in Ekron inscription and try to sift through everything, because every mention of Ekron is listed and every mention of inscription is mentioned. If you want Ekron inscription alone, you put a plus, double quote, Ekron inscription, double quote, and it'll take you to only those sites that mention that exact phrase. Okay? And that's the easiest way to locate it. But there, it's available online. Okay? Thank you for mentioning that. I forgot about that one, Stephen. All right? Any others? And then be prepared to answer some of the following questions. Any of those that you have a question about? Felix? Oh, that's back before. Bagaskoy, that's available in your textbook, and also available here. Bagaskoy is the capital of the Hittites, Turkey. Pardon? Ancient capital of the Hittites, right? There are no modern Hittites. Okay, the ancient capital of the Hittites, discovered by Winkler near Ankara, Turkey. But it's the capital, the ancient capital of the Hittites is Bagaskoy. All right. Any of these final questions that you have a problem with? Anyone? Feel free. I mean, if you've got a problem with it, there's bound to be someone else who just doesn't want to ask. So don't be bashful.
Where is Bagas going on the syllabus?
It's in the previous, oh, it's not in the syllabus. It's in the textbook. But Bagaskoi is at number 5, 5N in the study guide. Right. Jeremy?
We do have longer than 15 minutes for this.
Oh yes, you have 2 hours for this exam. Half of you will probably finish the exam in 1 hour. There'll be maybe 2 of you, maybe 3, who will finish it in 40 minutes. Okay? That'll give you a good idea. Most students finish it by an hour and a half. In an hour and a half's time, the classroom will be almost empty. There may be about 6 of you here left after an hour and a half. Yes, Gene.
Why do some scholars appear to late date for composition of the Book of Daniel?
Okay, why do some scholars adhere to a late date for the composition of the Book of Daniel? Because of the detailed description of the kingdoms of the Seleucids and of the Ptolemies in chapter 11 that would seem to indicate that he wrote it after the event. It has to do with vaticinum ex eventu. And also because of the Greek words found in the book of Daniel. The Greek terms used for some of the musical instruments, for example, when you have the image built on the plain of Dura and all the people are told to bow down before it, and Daniel's 3 friends refuse to. Some of the instruments listed there are Greek terms for the instruments. So that's one of the reasons. You'll find all of that in Archer on Daniel. Okay? That'll be in Archer if you look under Daniel. PJ? The SIL font, go to my website and there's a link there for the SIL font. Okay? I think I've got it still there on the page that has that's entitled Students. Okay? You can download that way. Yes, Felix?
Question for the Desh, 50,000 died Desh.
Right, 50,070. Remember we talked about that when we were going through textual criticism, and we went through all of the texts having to do with it. And we also talked about the fact that some claim that there's not any more room than for 25,000 people to live at Beit Shemesh. Go back and look over your notes from the lecture about what I gave as my position and arguments for saying that it was literally 50,070. Okay? Soon?
Do you want us to explain what's the problem first and then explain the solution, or just give the response immediately?
Just answer the question.
Okay, because how is it possible 50,079? I mean, I don't have a problem with that number because I take the text on face value.
Well,
so do I have to say that some people believe that the place?
You don't have to explain to me because I already know that some people believe. All you have to do is say, what's the evidence that says it's 50,070? Okay? So just answer the question is all you have to do. I'm assuming we both know the other part. All right?
You may be wrong.
We'll find out, won't we? Okay, anything else there? All right. What about the matter of your quizzes? Any questions from your quizzes that are still unresolved? Soon.
Reduction criticism. The bracket goes more than the R into the canon.
Into the canonical text, correct.
Okay.
Yes. The bracket, and in fact, let me explain, there is one of the brackets that is not exactly right, and I marked it on some of you, and I didn't take any points away, but canonical criticism should be just the canonical text. It shouldn't go with all the R. It should only include part of the R, because canonical criticism doesn't involve post-canonical redaction, and part of that R box is post-canonical. So canonical criticism stays with the canonical text itself. And it includes the R part that is behind there and involved in the canonical text. But the R that's after it isn't involved. Okay? All right? Question. Yes, Felix.
Do we need to memorize the biblical genres the way it was set up in the
Do you need to memorize the biblical genres? Yes, you do. You don't need to memorize it in the form that I gave it. Go back to the quiz where I gave it to you. And it didn't matter what order you gave it in. You just had to have the 10. Okay? You have to have the 10 Doesn't matter what order. Just make certain you can name those 10. And those 10 are listed in the syllabus. They're the bottom part there of the chart. Okay? Other questions from the quizzes? Giving you time to glance through them and see what there is there. Make certain you go over your quizzes, because that's 80% of your exam. Jay.
On quiz 3, the question about Isaiah, the 30-word total.
Right.
Can you give us a statement on that? Archer provides an extended discussion of the date over the unity of the book of Isaiah, and 3 concise sentences of no more than 30 words. Write what you know about that debate.
Okay. And again, I advise you to go back and look at Archer and what he says and summarize that debate. It involves things like, for example, vocabulary. All right? There's different vocabulary between the first 39 chapters and the last chapters, chapters 40 to 66. It involves a title of deity, the Holy One of Israel, that is found in both, that helps tie it together, and rarely anywhere else. It's found 25 times in Isaiah, 3 times in the Psalms, I think it is, very rarely anywhere else. It's a title that shows a unity in the book of Isaiah. The vocabulary difference between the first half and the second half has a lot to do with the topics that are being discussed. The first half deals with judgment, the last half is salvation. The vocabulary of judgment is different than the vocabulary of salvation. A number of those issues. So just review that section in Archer. If you go back and take a good look at the quizzes, I've given you the page references for almost every question on where to find them. Another reminder, too, that when I ask a question and I give a reference to FOTS, Face of Old Testament Studies, and maybe like on this last quiz I asked, name me a person who's known for Hebrew poetry, I mean I want it from that's mentioned in that section. And there may be others that they don't mention, but I want the ones that are mentioned there. So if I mark FOTS, the question is being asked from the viewpoint of FOTS. If SOTI is mentioned, I'm asking it from the viewpoint of Archer. And so I'm expecting that you're giving the answer Archer has. All right? Yes, Joe.
You mentioned in quiz 4 that you were going to ask the keys to identify liberal criticism.
Yes, and I didn't ask them, so you keep that for the final exam. The keys to liberal criticisms formed in a chart in Archer. Whitney?
Did you say that canonical criticism includes the R's before the canonical text?
They are before the end of the canonical one. If you remember right, let me just get it up here. Okay? Go back here. You see that R box up there? Yep. Part of it is back in the same area as canonical text, and part of it is not. The part that is on the right over here, this part here, is not part of canonical criticism. Canonical criticism only deals with the part of R that is from here to here. Okay? All right? Any other questions? Yes, Stephen.
You know how we had a couple extra credit questions?
Yes.
Would those extra credit questions be also possibilities for normal credit?
Definitely. Okay. Make certain you study the extra credit questions as well. I might ask about Atbash, and it may not be Scott bashing his head on the table. And so study the extra credit questions as well. Those are fair game for regular questions on the final exam. Jay?
80% of this.
80% of your final exam is taken from the quizzes. Correct. Brian?
Yeah, on quiz number 4 on the matching, you linked the Tel Dan gate with the Middle Bronze Age.
Correct.
Well, I'm just curious, Dan as a city, was the Tel Dan gate prior to the Israelite settlement then?
Yes, it is. Right. And Tel Dan is just the modern name of the site. Tel Dan is the modern name of the site, like Tel Mardik is of Ebla. Okay? Yes, go ahead, Matt. Atbash. Aleph, Tau. Aleph is the first letter, Tau is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So if you write it in code, if you write an Aleph, it stands for Tau. If you write a Tau, it stands for an Aleph. And then Beith is the second letter, and the second to last is Sheen, and that's where it gets the name Atbash. Aleph, Tau, Beith, Sheen. First and last. First is equal to last, last is equal to first. It's that old code if you did it as a kid. A is Z and Z is A, right? And Y is B and B is Y, except it's in Hebrew. And that's why you have a name given then in Jeremiah that is representative of Babel, represents the two Beiths and the Lamed. The Beiths are represented by Sheen. The second to the last is the same as the second. And the Lamed in Babel is represented by Kaf. So Shishak is a code word for Babel by Atbash. Okay? Sheen is the second to the last letter of the alphabet, so it represents the second letter of the alphabet. Okay, everyone understand that? Some of you look very puzzled. All right? Aleph, Beith, Gimel, etc. Sheen and Tau. You got all these others in here. Okay? If I write an Aleph, it equals a Tau. It's first for last. Okay? The Beith equals the second to last, Sheen. And the Gimel equals the next to last here. You go on through it that way. The Sheen represents then the Beith. And the Tau represents the Aleph. And so if I write Shishak, that is code for Babel. The Sheen and Beith, the Beith equals a Sheen. The Sheen equals a Beith. Okay? I can tell some of you didn't as kids use that code. How does it relate to some value? It helps you to understand what Jeremiah is writing about. What is Shishak in the book of Jeremiah? He's using Atbash. Right. And it was a characteristic code type thing used in the ancient Near East. And so it helps you to understand. You could look at Jeremiah and say, what is this Shishak he's referring to here? And then as you look at the context, say, is it Babel? How can it be Babel? That's how. It explains how you interpret that. Kind of like Pig Latin, huh? All right. Any other questions? Scott.
So you would say that it's code for Babel? I mean, is that...
Shishak is code for Babel.
Okay.
Atbash is a reverse letter code, where the first letter of the alphabet is the same, equals the last letter of the alphabet. The second letter of the alphabet represents the second to last letter of the alphabet, etc. Okay? Atbash. Atbash. And if you look at the quiz, I gave you the page number for it too, in Archer. Mike?
Yeah, are we responsible for all the page numbers that you've given us before each quiz? And even though you didn't put them on the quizzes, are we responsible for all those as well?
Well, you're responsible for all the reading of Archer and FOTS. But I'm not going to ask you about everything. I'm going to ask you about things I told you I'd ask you about, whether I used it on quizzes or not. So if you go back over your list of things, like the one was answered, the keys to liberalism, that I said I'd used and I didn't use in the quiz, it'll be on the final exam. So you can begin to build at least 10% more of the final exam by going back over those questions where I said I would ask you this, but I didn't ask it on a quiz. You can expect it on a final exam.
But that's in addition to the 80%?
That's in addition to the 80%. That'll bring you up to 90%. Okay? The other 10% is part of it's what you've gone over here. For example, recognizing the archaeological finds, that's not on the quizzes. That's involved in the final 10%. All right? I'm not going to ask things we haven't gone over. I'm not going to ask things in the text that we haven't gone over. I mean, not Bosch, things like that. Fine for extra credit to ask things like that, but for the body of the exam itself, it's going to be things we talked about. It's not going to be something I just expect you to catch by osmosis. All right? Any other questions? We got 2 minutes left. Let me do something real quick like here. Sir William Matthew Flinders Petrie, the father of the stratigraphic sequence, discovered the Merneptah stele, is the stela he discovered, not the Moabite stela. The Merneptah stela in the Theban necropolis, found that in the burial places of the dead down there on the Nile in 1896. James Henry Breasted is one of the famous Egyptologists in America, one of the most famous. He wrote an Egyptian grammar and an Egyptian history that are well respected. Here he's with his wife Frances and his son Charles. They were riding on horses all around Egypt during the summer of 1906 between sessions at school. The Sea People inscriptions. The Sea Peoples are the people from whom the Philistines originated. And the Sea Peoples are someone you really need to know something about. So pay attention to them and know who they are. Here's a picture of one of them. The specific headdress that he has there with that kind of comb top there and a band. As you look at a picture here, an artist showing the Sea Peoples landing with a bird on the prow of the ship. And the bird symbol is also found often on their pottery. We talked about Philistine pottery. It's the Sea People pottery. You can see the person there on the right is a Philistine by his headdress. The person on the left that's fighting there with the black hair and the white band around his hair, that's a Canaanite. That has to be one who's Canaanite there from the land of Palestine. The Philistines gave their name to the land of Palestine because of their dominance there, and they're probably derived from one group of the Sea Peoples called the Peleshet. The Peleshet. And at the temple of Ramses III at Thebes, there are inscriptions about his battle with the Sea Peoples. And you'll see these Sea People inscriptions, and here it depicts the land forces of them fighting against the chariots of the Egyptians. And you can actually go through and pick out which are the Egyptians and which are the Sea Peoples. And that's a land battle. And then here's a sea battle. And you can go through there and you can see here in the lower left, this is an Egyptian here. And you can see here this has the prow of the ship has the head of a bird. It's turning turtle here. It's turning upside down. And you see the person falling out of here has that headdress, the characteristic headdress of the Philistine people. And here's another of the Philistine people that had this type of headdress here. Would look like horns on the top of it. But you can tell the Egyptians, they're the ones with the hair that is kind of braided here in rows going back. And you can tell the difference between the different types of things they're doing there. Trudy Dothan and her husband are one of the world's leading experts on the Philistines. If you wrote a paper on the Philistines, you probably found something about her or read some of their material. I've enjoyed having you in here. I've enjoyed having the opportunity to open up some of the things in the Old Testament to just try to give you a taste of some of the different studies that are hot-button topics, some of the areas of difficulty, conflict, areas of problems and interpretation that are found in the area of Old Testament studies. And I hope you'll just remember the Old Testament is 2/3 at least, if not 75% of your total Bible. It is equally the inspired, inerrant Word of God, and we are commanded to teach the whole counsel of God. Yes, you'll do a lot of preaching in the New Testament. You have to. But don't neglect the Old, gentlemen. Spend time in the Old. You'll better understand the New.